was used for housing female inmates. Male prisoners were kept in cells on the second floor or in an open area on the third floor. Additionally, there was a tower at the top of the building with 2 cells for solitary confinement and housing prisoners with severe mental problems. Today, the tower floor has been removed, allowing you to see the tower's interior from the building's third floor. The new Colquitt County Jail opened on August the 14th, 1915. Not only was it praised for its design and security features, local officials could boast that the jail featured electric lights, steam heat, and modern bathrooms. But the jail had another feature that prisoners were not particularly happy about. At the time of the jail's construction, state law provided for death by hanging as the only legal means of execution in Georgia. The sheriff of the county where a capital crime was committed was responsible for carrying out executions. In 1859, the Georgia General Assembly passed 2 laws that would affect Colquitt County. On December the 13th, Governor Joseph E. Brown signed into law an act creating Moultrie and designating it as Colquitt County's seat of government. 2 days later, Governor Brown signed an act prohibiting public executions in Georgia. At the time, hanging was the only legal form of execution, so the new law meant that hangings could no longer be witnessed by the public. If a jail did not have a private area for hangings, the county was required to erect an enclosure around any outdoor gallows built to carry out the execution. To avoid the cost of having to build a tall fence around the jail, Colquitt County officials decided that the county's new jail would have an internal gallows. Thus, the contractor built an area on the third floor to carry out executions. A metal ring for the noose was anchored into the third floor ceiling. Immediately beneath the ring was a metal trap door in the floor. The condemned prisoner would stand on the trap door while the noose was secured to his neck. Then the executioner would pull a lever, releasing the doors beneath the condemned. The body then was retrieved from the second floor. Within days of the new jail's dedication, the gallows were used to hang a man convicted of 2 murders. The condemned prisoner had been kept in the Lowndes County Jail for safekeeping. However, as soon as Colquitt County's new jail opened, the prisoner was transferred to Moultrie, where he was hanged on August the 19th, 1915, just 5 days after the jail opened. Just before his execution, the condemned prisoner admitted to 9 other murders. In 1924, the Georgia General Assembly abolished death by hanging. Instead, future executions would be by electrocution at a state prison. Thus, Colquitt County's gallows were never used again. But they remain a visible reminder of the era when death by hanging was the only legal form of execution in Georgia. At some point in the 1930s or the 40s, the red brick jail was painted white. It remained white until the paint was removed in the mid-1990s. In 1980, the Colquitt County Jail was added to the National Register of Historic Places. However, it continued to serve as the county jail until the summer of 1990. On July the 1st, 1990, a new and much larger county jail opened on Veterans Parkway. Inmates then housed in the old jail were transferred to the new facility. Knowing that the old jail would close, a Colquitt County Jail Restoration Committee was appointed in 1989 to plan for the future use of the old jail and this historic building. Almost $1 million was raised for the jail's restoration. On February the 4th, 1996, the restored jailhouse opened as the new home of the Moultrie, Colquitt County Chamber of Commerce. Next, from the jail, proceed one block back to the downtown square, to the two-story cream-colored building on the corner of First Avenue and First Street. Louis Friedlander was born in Lithuania and immigrated to the United States in 1905 at age 14. Louis had a brother living in South Georgia, so he headed for Georgia. Somehow, he ended up in Colquitt County, and in 1907, he decided to try to make a living as a peddler. First, he sold items from a pack on his back, and then from a wagon pulled by a mule. Louis had an uncanny ability as a salesman, and by age 17, he was able to purchase the W.B. Duke's dry goods store in downtown Moultrie. At first, he called his new business the Bargain Store, but soon he changed its name to Friedlander's Department Store. In 1935, Louis Friedlander purchased the 3 buildings adjacent to his store and then had them all torn down. In their place, he built a new 30,000 square foot department store that had a main floor and several split-level floors. A 1947 renovation replaced the split-level floors with a mezzanine and a second floor. For decades, Friedlander's was Moultrie's largest and premier department store. By the 1970s, Louis Friedlander had opened a chain of department stores in southwest Georgia, including a second store in Moultrie. However, shopping habits were changing across America as more and more people preferred shopping centers to downtown stores. Friedlander's downtown store later closed. Since then, several businesses have operated in the old Friedlander building. More recently, the Moultrie-Colquitt County Development Authority purchased the building in an effort to support the expansion of the Moultrie branch of the Abraham Baldwin Agricultural College, or ABAC, as it is commonly called. ABAC is located in Tifton but has a branch in Moultrie operating from the downtown building that once housed J.C. Penney. However, in order to serve more students and offer a 4-degree program in Moultrie, ABAC needs additional space. The vacant Friedlander building has been identified as one possible location for an expanded ABAC presence in Moultrie. One plan would be for the building to be renovated to create 3 floors. ABAC would use 1 or 2 of the upper floors, with the Friedlander's ground floor saved for retail and other uses. However, any renovation of the Friedlander building for use by ABAC would require funding by the State Board of Regents, plus additional revenue from federal or state grants and other sources. For the present, the Moultrie-Colquitt County Development Authority is hoping that ABAC's future growth in Moultrie will require use of at least part of the Friedlander building. However, given the uncertainty of external funds for the building's renovation, the authority is also pursuing other clients and uses for this landmark structure. In terms of architectural significance, the Friedlander building is an outstanding example of Art Deco design. Art Deco dates from an international exposition in Paris in 1925 that sought to promote modern and futuristic lifestyles. The movement proved very popular in America, where it influenced not only architecture, but art, interior design, furniture, and even clothing and jewelry. Characteristics of Art Deco design are streamlined appearance, smooth surfaces, low relief, bright colors, flat roofs, and an ultra-modern appearance. Despite various ownerships and over the past quarter century, the building's marquee still spells out Friedlander's in the original Art Deco lettering. The Friedlander building is the only remaining Art Deco structure in Colquitt County. In fact, the only other surviving Art Deco building in the area is the Mitchell County Courthouse in Camilla, 30 miles to the west. Next from Friedlanders, proceed 1 block north along 1st Street to the corner of Central Avenue. Located in the corner of East Central Avenue and 1st Street East is a bronze memorial depicting a World War II veteran sitting on a bench. Next to the veteran is a bronze copy of Tom Brokaw's book, The Greatest Generation. The veteran is leaning on a cane with a small American flag and 2 poppies in his left hand. The memorial was commissioned by the Colquitt County Commission and sculpted by Sandy Proctor of Tallahassee, Florida. The statue was dedicated on May 25th of 2003. Immediately behind the statue is the Colquitt County Courthouse Annex. Dedicated in 2003, the building's most notable features include 6 ionic columns supporting a portico with a triangle pediment, arched windows, and a cornice at the top of the exterior walls. The building's architectural style is primarily neoclassical revival for the 2-story facade facing outward, with a plain 3rd story set back from the front facade and largely blocked from street level view. Next, as you face the courthouse annex, take the sidewalk along the left side of the building. Walk north along 1st Street for 1/2 block. Adjacent to the back of the courthouse annex is located the Luke Strong and Son Mortuary. Originally, this was the Henderson Funeral Home building. In 1901, the Henderson Furniture Company and Funeral Home opened for business on the south side of the downtown square. In 1908, the company moved 1 block north to a new building on the corner of Central Avenue and 1st Street. The funeral home part of the business operated in a building behind the hardware store on 1st Street. In 1930, the Henderson Funeral Home moved directly across the street to a new 2-story brick building shown here. Though the ownership would change, the Henderson Funeral Home would operate here for the next 61 years. In 1991, the owners of the Henderson Funeral Home changed its name and moved to a new location south of town. 4 years later, Luke Strong Jr. opened the Luke Strong and Son Mortuary in the old Henderson Funeral Home building. Built in 1930, the Henderson Funeral Home building is an example of colonial revival architecture. This style is based on the Georgian architecture popular in early American history and was popular for both buildings and private residences. Characteristics of colonial revival style include brick construction with a strong emphasis on symmetry. Other architectural features associated with colonial revival are the 3 dormer windows in the slanted roof, the cornice with dentils separating the facade from the roof, and the masonry lintels along each window. The entrance to the building features a portico supported by 4 small Doric columns. Also of interest are the 2 brick chimneys rising from the slanted roof on both ends of the building. Next, proceed a 1/2 block north to the corner of 1st Street and 1st North. As you cross over 1st Street, you'll see Moultrie's municipal building across the street. This structure was built in 1965 on the site of the earlier City Hall built in 1928. Now proceed south along 1st Street back to the downtown square. At the corner of First Street and Central Avenue, you will see a white two-story building. Prior to 1900, a brick saloon was located here. Shortly after the turn of the century, the saloon was turned into a bowling alley. In 1906, the bowling alley was torn down and replaced with the two-story building shown here at the right of this early photo. Typical of downtown commercial architecture of the era, the new building featured a large retail area on the first floor, with room on the second for offices and storage. The building's primary decorative feature is a large cornice with dentils located 3 feet below the roof line. The building, which still stands today, appears to be constructed of rusticated stone blocks. However, in reality, the exterior consists of hollow concrete blocks cast so that the outer surface appears to be rough stone. This is the only building in downtown Moultrie of this composition. The Henderson Furniture Company and Funeral Home was the first occupant of the building. Today, we wouldn't dream of combining a furniture store with the funeral home. But in the early 1900s, the funeral business was less sophisticated than today, and making wooden caskets was not that different from making wooden furniture. The furniture part of the business was located in the front, while the funeral home operated from a building in the rear facing First Street. In 1930, the funeral home moved into a new building directly across the street. In the early 1950s, the Henderson Furniture Store moved out of its Central Avenue location and into the building of the rear occupied by the funeral home. In 1954, the J.C. department store moved from its Main Street location to the vacant Henderson Furniture Company building. Penney's maintained its downtown location here until the late 1970s. In the mid-1980s, Abraham Baldwin Agricultural College in Tifton expressed interest in establishing a branch in Moultrie. The Southwest Georgia Bank donated the old Penney's building to ABAC. Subsequently, the Georgia Board of Regents and Colquitt County funded the building's renovation. The new facility became known as ABAC on the Square, and in 1987 began offering classes. This makes Moultrie one of the few cities in Georgia to have a college located on the downtown square. The principal exterior change was made to the first floor facade. The large plate glass windows were replaced with smaller office windows, and a new entrance with pediment and engaged columns was added. Next, proceed west to the two-story red brick building in the middle of the block. The Coleman Building is a simple but attractive two-story brick structure typical of downtown commercial buildings at the beginning of the 20th century. Built in 1900, it is the oldest commercial building with original facade on Moultrie's downtown square. Its most notable architectural features are the interesting brick cornice, the 4 pair of arched windows, and the arched door with fanlight that provides access to the second floor stairway. The Coleman Building was divided into 2 parts, each intended for commercial use on the ground floor. The building's second floor could be used for storage by the first floor businesses. Over the past century, the Coleman Building has been used for various purposes. Early uses included a candy shop, a grocery store, dry goods store, and a barber shop. One of the more interesting uses can be seen in this 1920 Sanborn fire insurance map, which shows a cigar factory on the second floor of the section of the building on the left. Your final stop before returning to the starting point of your tour is a 2-story building with tan brick facade. Based on the wide expanse of plate glass windows on the ground floor, it is obvious that this was once a department store. The Wiggs Building was constructed in the late 1890s. Originally, the two-story brick building housed a general store on the first floor. Around 1904, the city of Moultrie leased the second floor of the Wiggs Building. For over a decade, this served as Moultrie City Hall. At some point before 1920, the city moved to another facility. In 1928, a new two-story city hall was constructed on the site of Moultrie's current municipal building. In this 1905 photo of a July the 4th celebration on the courthouse square, you can see the Wiggs Building behind the telephone pole on the other side of the square. In terms of architecture, the two-story brick building was a typical commercial style for the time, with the first floor intended for retail use. At the time of this photo, Moultrie City Hall was located on the second floor of the building. Later, a new facade was added and the building remodeled. The Belk Hudson department store moved into the building in 1941 and maintained its business here for the next 25 years. In the early 1960s, Belk's remodeled the Wiggs Building to give it a more modern look. The facade was changed, the second floor windows were bricked over, and the interior of the building was renovated. But the renovation could not create needed space, so Belk's left its downtown location when the new